Last year for Halloween, I talked about why I hated horror movies, and ironically, I'm regurgitating content from the time that I studied horror movies to death. As I have learned through various mythologies and fables, the one thing that remains consistent is how vague and wishy-washy they can get. Half the population or more forgot that sirens were never evil mermaids. Nobody can pinpoint what a fae creature is and how vague it gets represented across the board. Furthermore now is what I want to talk about today, which may surprise you as being a misinterpretation of its original folklore. The zombie. I'm going to tell you why everything that you know about zombies is wrong. Usually these kind of videos begin with a statement saying what the zombie or the creature in question actually is, but because our perception of zombies is so warped, we simply cannot do that. But I can say that the reason that the depiction of zombies has been the way that they are is thanks to cinema. Many believe that the earliest depiction of a zombie in media became the most famed, with it being Night of the Living Dead, but oh, are you wrong about the earlier part, not the popular part. The earliest depiction of zombies in film dates back to 1932 with the film White Zombie, starring Bela Lugosi. Yes, that Bela Lugosi, the Dracula Bela Lugosi. People will look back at that film and think, wow, those aren't zombies. They may be called zombies in the film, but there's no way they are actually zombies. This is because this is not the depiction of a zombie as we know it today. Zombies originally came from Haitian folklore, in which a dead body becomes resurrected and controlled by voodoo. As a result, this body loses its free will and it is under the influence of a voodoo master. They are often depicted in folklore and in the 1932 film White Zombie as a slave after death. This is because the folklore was inspired by Haitian slavery, according to Professor Annie Willens. French slave owners would even instill this fear into their slaves of them dying and becoming a zombie to prevent them from committing suicide. Real dark if you ask me. The true horror story in all this. In White Zombie, the voodoo master played by Bela Lugosi reanimates the dead to have them become his own slaves. Whether due to budgeting or this being not part of the lore of zombies yet, they didn't look dead in the slightest. They just had that stare. That just mindless stare of someone being hypnotized. Zombie films continued to appear in the late 30s and the early 40s with this voodoo trope in mind. Quickly now we're going to look at books, something that is very important in the development of the undead stereotype, the apocalypse. Whoa. I Am Legend is a 1954 horror book written by Richard Matheson and features many horror tropes. The undead in this is not called a zombie, but it shares tropes with the modern interpretation of the zombie. The hordes of mindless undead who have grown in numbers due to a bacteria infection, and part of the novel is discovering a cure or gaining immunity from said infection. Although in this novel, they were more vampiric. But now let's jump ahead once again to 1968. Something you may be familiar with. Night of the Living Dead, the classic zombie horror film. The kind of zombie that you think about when you hear the word uttered into the abyss. Zombie. The inspiration for this undead did come from I Am Legend, but it also had its share of new takes on the undead. The theorized origins of these reanimated dead existing came from radiation. Another notable feature here is how the zombie kills and infects people in order to grow their numbers. These ghouls, as they were called in the film, also consumed the flesh of living creatures. Notice how I said they were called ghouls. This is because director George A. Romero never referred to the creatures as zombies. Romero didn't feel like the term zombie described his undead, and ghouls suited it better, especially when we find out the origin of the ghoul. In Arabic folklore, a ghoul is a flesh-devouring demonic creature who is often found in graveyards. And that's just one of many interpretations, like seriously, there is a lot. Nobody truly knows what a ghoul is supposed to be, but this interpretation is likely where Romero's ghoul inspirations came from. 10 years later, however, when a sequel was made, zombie was the main term used in Dawn of the Dead. And people in the public did use the term zombie to describe Romero's undead rather than the intended ghoul. So why the fuck did Romero change his mind? The answer? I have no clue. Me and internet people who have tried to find out why Romero calls undead zombies in the sequel is lost to me. Peer pressure? Producer pressure? The fact that nobody knows actually what a ghoul is? It is honestly a shame because zombies as we know them today feels like a whitewashed version of the original zombie. There's no link to Haitian culture and the spirituality of becoming a zombie. And if you told the average Joe that this was what a zombie actually was, they would not believe you. But anyway, let's just go back to the history of zombies. Romero's zombies become the roots of the zombie that we know and love today. But so much can only be done with this, especially when he made it a full-out franchise. No other zombie films of the time were as successful as Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead. However, Asian cinema decided to take their attempt at undead. Zombies blew up in the 80s and 90s in Japan, China, and Korea. This led to video games featuring zombies blowing up, such as Resident Evil. This caused a resurgence of the genre as a whole back in Western countries, with movies like 28 Days Later and comedies like Shaun of the Dead popping up in the early 2000s. But with this media, there were two different directions that were taken. First off, is they become scarier, smarter, faster, and tougher to be taken down. World War Z, Walking Dead, and 28 Days Later are prime examples of this. This is because scary is the key to horror. The original zombies, where they're shambling and slow, they didn't become as much of a threat, and they were made fun of in Shaun of the Dead for being so slow and shambling, and yet people still died to them, even when it could be so simple to outrun a zombie. But the other direction that zombies got taken was humanized. They weren't vicious, but a part of human society in some cases. Pushing Daisies, iZombie, the Zombies film franchise created by Disney, which from what I heard is a bad form of pseudo-racism? That is the main outline that Wikipedia and most researchers say is the history of zombies in the cinema, as they have once again become stale. Or have they? You see, they have now changed again. There are many creatures who are considered undead, but still have the flavors and the clear inspirations taken from Romero's original zombies. Well, not original, but original to the depiction that we know today. The White Walkers from Game of Thrones is the example that springs to mind for most of you, but a more recent example has been the Clickers from The Last of Us. This is likely where the zombie is going to head in the future. It is evolving with new forms to become scary and new origins to terrify us with, especially as we still crawl out of pandemic times. This also makes me wonder if we will see a return to the original Haitian roots in zombie stories in the coming future. The one with the zombie master specifically. We've certainly seen it plenty of times in Dungeons and Dragons, where sometimes people decide to make a master controlling all the undead in the area, like Strahd does in Curse of Strahd, even though he's undead himself. But we haven't really seen it in books, movies, and TV shows. Is the public even ready for that? Is this a story that will get told from its roots again? If you do happen to know some zombie stories that actually reference the Haitian culture that it came from, then I would be dying to know about this. I find that the Haitian zombie concept is way cooler than the popularized concept that came today. I feel like a horror hipster.